All right, so now we're going to take that Illustrator file, the multi-layered Illustrator file of the gears, and we're going to bring it into After Effects and animate the gears. As you remember from previous tutorials, we don't want to import as footage. We're going to import as composition, retain layer sizes. And yes, we do want to go ahead and create a composition, and then I'll click open. And you might notice I have some other things set up. So I just wanted to show you a few different ways to animate the gears, and then we'll try it ourselves. So this first method that I have up here for us in the composition window is animating the gears, and I'll just play this. So this is animating gears by adding keyframes, right? And so you can see my rotation parameter is open, and I have an initial keyframe at 0 degrees. And then if I go down here to the end, I've pushed the keyframes all the way to the edge of the timeline. So I can't actually access them, but if I were to scoot them in a little bit, I could see what those keyframes were set to. And it's set to 22.5 degrees, minus 22.5 degrees, and 22.5 degrees. And so what I did to get that number is, if you'll remember, the gear had 16 points on it. So I divided 360, which is a complete rotation, by 16, and I got 22.5. So, and then what I did is I ended up moving these keyframes almost past my last frame. And the reason why is because I want these keyframes to essentially equal this starting point, right? So that there's a perfect loop. And so really what's happening is each of these little nubs here is moving so that this nub at the end of the timeline is where this nub was, and this nub is where this nub is, and so on. So that's one way of animating the gears. But I want to introduce the concept of expressions, and so I'm going to show you this timeline as well. Now, if I open the rotation parameters for these three layers, you'll notice that there aren't any keyframes at all. When it comes to this kind of animation, either doing keyframes or expressions, it's about the same level of difficulty, but it's nice to know that expressions are there. So expressions are kind of the scripting language of After Effects. And as you get into more complicated animations, walk cycles and this kind of thing, it's very useful to have expressions. So I'll explain a little bit about what those are, but this is a completely different way of animating the gears, and this is what we're going to do today, since you've already had practice with keyframing. This is the gears composition that I just imported with you, so I'll double click on that, and you'll notice that it just says layer 1 copy, layer 1 copy 2, and I could have labeled this in Illustrator, but I didn't, so we'll go ahead and do that now, and we'll go ahead and assign each gear its own color as well. So I just want to kind of hide the visibility and make it clear so that I know which gear I'm dealing with also, since they're not labeled. So layer 1 copy 2, that's actually the blue gear. So I will press return and label that blue gear. And again, you don't want to double click. You just want to click on the layer, press return, and that's how you relabel it. Now my blue gear is at the bottom, so I'm going to move it to the bottom of my composition. This doesn't actually affect the animation. It wouldn't matter if my blue layer was on top or the bottom. It's easier for me to navigate this composition if I have things organized. So I'm gonna see what layer 1 copy is. I'm going to hide the visibility. Okay, so that appears to be the orange gear. So once again, I select layer 1 copy, press return, and orange gear. All right, and then that's in the middle, and then that leaves layer 1, which must be the green gear. And I will color code those as well. So orange The orange gear will be orange, the green gear will be green. And as we've mentioned before in previous tutorials, when I select composition retain layer sizes, it allows each of these layers to occupy only as much space as it needs. And you can see that space indicated by the bounding box, right? So it's very easy for me to select the orange gear without accidentally selecting the blue gear or the green gear, which if I didn't have retain layer sizes, it wouldn't matter which gear I clicked on. Whichever layer was at the top, that would be the one that was selected, in this case, the green gear. So I could click here and it would select the green gear if I did not choose import as composition retain layer sizes. Let's talk a little bit about expressions. As mentioned before, we're dealing with the rotation parameter, right? Obviously, we're rotating the gears. Two of them are rotating clockwise, one is rotating counterclockwise. And I'm going to shift select all three gears and press R for rotation. All right, so this is where we're going to add the expression. I'm going to go over to the stopwatch for the green gear. I'm going to option click, and then it's going to give me this expression script. So I'm actually going to delete all of this. And so what I want to tell After Effects is that I want to rotate this gear 22.5 degrees in 1 second. And again, the way that I got there is I divided 360 by 16. 16 is the number of points on the gear, the number of nubs. So I'll type time and then this asterisk, which means times. So time times 22.5. So if I had done time times 1, it would have advanced 1 degree over the course of the second. So you can see where this is going. If I had a 12-pointed gear, I would do time times 30, right? So it really depends on how many points you have. All right, and then I click off of that and I go to the next one. I option click rotation, and this one, the orange one, should be going the opposite direction. So I go time asterisk or time times minus 22.5 so that can go the other way. And then finally I go to the blue gear rotation, option click on the stopwatch, and time times 22.5. All right, so if you type that script in, you should have something that looks like this. At this point, I'm just introducing the concept of expressions. Knowing that these exist, if you look into them a little bit more, there's a lot of really cool things that expressions can do. So for example, we could add music and tie the scale parameter to the music so that when there's a beat in the music, the gear sort of pulses. So there's a lot of really cool things that you can do with expressions that would take a very long time, an unreasonably long time to do with keyframes. All right, so the other thing that I wanted to point out, I'll just go ahead and hide the rotation by shift selecting all the gears again and pressing R, and that will hide that parameter. So the other thing that I wanted to point out, I'm going to temporarily scale this green gear up. Now you'll remember when I was talking about vector graphics for the Illustrator part of this tutorial that I said vector graphics, like the gears that we created, they should be infinitely scalable without having any sort of pixelation or fuzziness at the edges if I scale this up to say 400 or 500. So I'll do that. I'm going to press S for scale, type in 400, and okay, so The other thing I want to do is fit, just so we can see this a little bit more clearly. So yeah, so we're looking at that center hole of the green gear, and there's a problem here, right? So the edges of this hole are pixelated and fuzzy, and you can also see down here, same thing. So what's the deal, right? So we were supposed to get crisp, clean vector graphics. Okay, so whenever you import an Illustrator file or a vector graphic into After Effects, you have to tell After Effects that you want to do something called continuously rasterize. If I'm in my switches mode, which is when I can see all these little icons, if you can't see that, you might be in the modes, right? So just go down here at the bottom, toggle switches and modes, and you can see all these little icons. The second one looks like a sun, and I'm going to click on that, and you can see right away those lines cleaned up. So I'll just toggle it on and off, and so you can see the difference, right? So make sure that you continuously rasterize if you scale an Illustrator file up. Well, I'm going to change that back to 100. And if your Illustrator file does not go above 100% scale, there's really no need to continuously rasterize. But I did want to point that out if you have a vector animation that you end up scaling up. All right, and then just from here, all we do is export as we have done before.